praying mantis / she sees the world like no other insect on Earth. She is the only insect on the planet with true 3D vision. She bites off her partner's head during sex, and he does not stop. She has exactly one ear for her entire body, and it hears bat screams. Her very first name in ancient Greek did not mean predator, it meant prophet. She weighs less than 10 grams, and large birds are still afraid of her. One single insect somehow earned 3 completely different reputations: prophet, god, and killer, all 3 images invented independently by different peoples. When I started digging into this insect, I could not stop for several days. Every new fact broke whatever picture I had built the day before. Today we talk about the mantis, a creature humanity has worshipped and feared in equal measure. Stay until the end. Halfway through, you'll learn why she needs 2 pairs of eyes at once. Let's start with the name, because the name is already a small lie. In Russian, she is called Bogomol, literally, the one who prays to God. But that name was never about religious devotion on the insect's part. The ancient Greeks called this kind of creature mantis. In Greek, mantis does not mean predator, it means prophet, seer, diviner. The word comes from a verb meaning to be seized by inspiration. To the Greeks, the raised forelegs looked like a person in prophetic trance. Linnaeus in the 18th century named the species Mantis religiosa, literally the religious prophet. The English praying mantis is a direct translation of that same image. Every European language looks at this insect and sees a saint, not a killer. That is a fairly ironic contrast with what she actually does, and we'll get there. Now to the taxonomy, because there's a surprise hiding here too. The order is called Mantodea, coined by German entomologist Hermann Burmeister in 1838. And here's the twist: her closest living relatives are cockroaches and termites. Mantises, termites, and cockroaches formerly belong to one single larger group. In essence, a mantis is a highly specialized cockroach that switched to ambush hunting. Instead of hiding in cracks, she chose to sit motionless and wait for prey. About 2,400 species of mantis have been described worldwide so far. Sizes range from under 2 centimeters to nearly 30 in the tropical giants. Mantises live on every continent except Antarctica, mostly in warm climates. There are countless species, and they look wildly different from one another. Some mimic dry fallen leaves down to the veins and browned edges. There is a ghost mantis, nearly transparent, resembling a scrap of dead grass. There is a boxer mantis with bright markings on its forelegs for threat displays. There are stick mantises almost impossible to tell apart from a thin, dry twig. There are species under a centimeter long and tropical giants nearly a human palm wide. Yet all these wildly different-looking insects share the exact same hunting anatomy. The differences are mostly about camouflage, not about the ambush strategy itself. Fun fact, the European mantis became Connecticut's official state insect back in 1977. Lawmakers picked her for that elegant Greek name and her reputation as a garden helper. Now to the head, because a mantis head is built unlike any other insect's. She is the only known insect capable of turning her head a full 180 degrees. Most insects only see what's directly in front of them. She can literally look behind her. On her head sit 2 large, bulging compound eyes. Inside each eye there appears to be a dark spot that seems to track your every move. That's an optical illusion, not an actual pupil. Scientists call it a pseudopupil. The dark patch is simply the part of the eye where light happens to bounce back at you. Wherever you stand, that pseudopupil will look like it's staring straight at you. Each compound eye is built from thousands of tiny individual lenses. That structure is called a facet eye, and it's common across most insects. But in a mantis, those 2 eyes sit unusually wide apart on a triangular head. That wide placement gives her almost a full circle of vision without needing to move. Combine that with the 180-degree head turn, and her field of view is nearly complete. She can spot movement almost anywhere around her without turning her whole body. That matters enormously for an ambush predator who gives herself away by moving. The less she moves, the longer she stays invisible, both to prey and to her own predators. Now, the actual reason we opened this whole episode on her eyes. In 2016, scientists at Newcastle University did something genuinely bizarre. They glued tiny 3D glasses directly onto the head of a living mantis. A special beeswax-based adhesive kept the lenses in place during the experiment. They set up a miniature screen in front of her and played a 3D movie of prey. The illusion was so convincing that she tried to grab prey that did not exist. That's how scientists finally proved that a mantis genuinely sees the world in 3D. And this is not a minor detail. She is the only known insect with confirmed stereovision. Among every invertebrate on the planet, she is still the only one, full stop. The first hints of this actually go back to the 1980s. Researcher Samuel Rossel fitted mantises with tiny prisms, shifting the image per eye. The insect's behavior hinted at depth perception, but nobody could prove it outright. For the next 30 years, the field barely moved. The right tools simply didn't exist. The right tool finally showed up when someone decided to literally put glasses on a bug. Sometimes the hardest scientific question isn't solved by a new theory, just a new tool. In this case, the tool was a pair of glasses the size of a fingernail, cut from colored film. Among vertebrates, stereovision shows up in primates, cats, horses, some birds. But among invertebrates, nothing like it had ever been found before. In 2018, the same research team went further and found something new. Mantis vision turns out to work on a completely different principle than ours. Humans compare the brightness of two images, one from each eye, and calculate the gap. That's what lets us see depth even in a single still photograph. A mantis doesn't compare static brightness at all. She tracks how brightness changes over time. What matters to her isn't the current frame, it's how that frame shifts moment to moment. That means a mantis has zero interest in the depth of anything that isn't moving. But she can perceive depth in a moving object even against an almost identical background. Researchers call this a genuinely new form of stereopsis, unlike anything known before. The logic is simple. An ambush hunter doesn't care about the object, only its distance while moving. The whole system exists to answer exactly one question: is the target close enough to strike? Engineers are already studying this principle to build simpler vision algorithms for robots. A heavy 3D computation can be swapped for a far lighter system based purely on motion. So a tiny insect quietly became a teacher for 21st century robotics. Mantises often show strong sexual dimorphism, and it goes beyond just size. Females are typically larger and heavier than males, sometimes nearly twice the weight. In many species, only the males keep fully functional flight wings as adults. Heavier females in some species barely fly and spend most of their life in one spot. Lighter males, by contrast, fly actively at night chasing a female's pheromone trail. The raptorial forelegs are far more complex mechanically than they first appear. Researchers counted almost twice as many muscles in them as in her ordinary walking legs. That surplus of muscle is exactly what gives each strike its precision and split-second correction. Now to the strike itself, the one thing that built her whole killer reputation. A mantis's front legs are modified into a grasping tool lined with rows of sharp spines. At rest, they're folded as if in prayer, which is where the whole name comes from. But it isn't prayer. It's a loaded trigger that can fire at any second. Once prey gets close enough, the legs snap open in one fast sweeping motion. For a long time, she was called the owner of the fastest strike among all insects. That's a popular misconception, and it's worth unpacking properly right here. The actual speed record belongs to the mantis shrimp, not to the mantis insect at all. A mantis shrimp isn't even related to her. It's a crustacean named for looking similar. Her own strike, the insect's strike, takes anywhere from 60 to almost 290 milliseconds. That's not one instant snap, it's a flexible, adjustable motion recalibrated on the fly. Researchers showed she can slow down or even abort a badly aimed strike mid-motion. That's far more interesting than the myth of an uncontrollable reflex faster than a blink. Now for a secret almost no nature documentary about predators ever mentions. A mantis can hear, and it works nothing like you'd expect. Most hearing insects have a pair of ears, one on each side of the body. A mantis has exactly one ear, and it sits dead center on the underside of her thorax. She is the only known animal on Earth with, quite literally, a single ear. Scientists call it a cyclopean ear, after the one-eyed giant of myth. The discovery was made in 1986 by researchers David Yeager and Ronald Hoy. Before that, mantises were assumed to be completely deaf insects with no hearing at all. This cyclopean ear is tuned to a very narrow band of ultrasound, 25 to 45 kilohertz. That happens to be exactly the frequency range of hunting bats at night. The moment a flying mantis picks up that shriek, she changes course within a split second. Her body suddenly flexes and she drops into an almost vertical dive like a fighter jet. In lab tests, mantises with intact hearing almost always escaped simulated bat attacks. Mantises with deliberately disabled hearing got caught nearly every single time. And here's the strangest twist in the whole story about that ear. The mantis lineage has existed on this planet longer than bats have existed at all, which means this hearing organ appeared before she had any reason to fear a bat. The ear most likely originally served a completely different purpose, mate finding or other cues. Only later did evolution repurpose an already existing organ against a newer, deadlier threat. It's a neat example of an old tool suddenly finding a brand new use. Most species carry only that single ear in the middle of the chest. But in a few separate lineages, mantises independently evolved a second hearing organ. This second organ sits closer to the front of the thorax and is tuned to a completely different frequency. It responds to low sounds around 2 to 4 kilohertz, nothing to do with bat ultrasound. What that second ear is actually for is still genuinely debated among researchers. Now to camouflage, because mantises are true masters of blending into their surroundings. Some species look like dry leaves, others like bark, others like twigs with little knots. But the single most striking example is the orchid mantis of Southeast Asia. She looks like the petals of an exotic flower, down to the pink shade and shape. And here's a detail most people get completely backwards. It's assumed camouflage like this exists purely to hide from predators. In reality, the flower shape also works the other way. It actively lures prey in. Studies show insects fly toward the orchid mantis at least as often as toward a real flower. So the camouflage is a shield against some animals and bait for others at the same time. The orchid mantis also changes color as she matures, and that's not random either. Young nymphs are black and red, mimicking a toxic bug and scaring off predators. Once grown, she turns white and pink, switching into flower camouflage for hunting. A specific pigment transport protein inside her skin cells drives that entire switch. One single organism changes its survival strategy at the skin level, twice in one lifetime. To find a mate, mantises rely mostly on scent rather than sight. Females release specific pheromones that drift through the air for dozens of meters. Males pick up those molecules with their antennae and fly straight upwind toward the source. As he closes in on a female, the male suddenly slows down into extreme caution mode. In some species, he approaches from the side, staying out of her direct field of view. In others, males will only risk approaching in total darkness. All this caution comes down to one simple fact: the cost of a mistake is brutally high. One wrong move, and instead of mating, he becomes her next meal. After mating, a female lays her eggs not one at a time but in one large single batch. That batch is coated in a foamy fluid that hardens quickly on contact with air. The hardened foam becomes a tough protective case called an ootheca. A single ootheca can hold anywhere from a few dozen to 300 eggs at once. That case can survive a full winter, shielding the eggs from frost and most predators. Come spring, dozens of tiny nymphs hatch out of one ootheca almost simultaneously. And almost immediately, another round of cannibalism begins that nobody really talks about. Hungry newborn nymphs attack each other without hesitation right at the hatching site. Only a small fraction of the original hatchlings survive to adulthood in the end. It's just another form of natural selection weeding out the weak at step 1 of life. An adult mantis, meanwhile, is not remotely limited to insects in her diet. Large species have been documented catching and eating frogs, lizards, small snakes, even mice. There are recorded cases of attacks on small fish at the water's edge and on baby turtles. For an insect a few centimeters long, that is a genuinely enormous hunting range. A mantis is the textbook example of an ambush predator, not an active chaser. Instead of burning energy on a chase, she sits motionless for hours in one spot. That strategy saves an enormous amount of energy compared to constantly hunting around. Staying still doubles as a way to stay hidden from her own predators too. Going after prey that's too fast or too large can cost her a leg or her life. So she carefully assesses size and speed before committing to any attack at all. A hungry mantis, though, starts lunging at bigger and riskier targets than a well-fed one. The longer the gap since her last meal, the wider the list of things she's willing to attack. Now to the main event, the reason most people click on a video about this insect at all. Sexual cannibalism is real. Females sometimes do eat their partner. But this is exactly where the biggest myth about this whole insect begins. Pop culture insists that literally every single mating ends with the male's death. Actual field research tells a very different story. In one of the most cited studies of wild European mantises, cannibalism occurred in 31% of matings. Other studies put the number anywhere between 13 and 28% of encounters. In other words, in most cases the male walks away fine and can mate again elsewhere. How often it happens depends heavily on species, the female's hunger, and study conditions. In labs where females were deliberately kept hungry, cannibalism rates came out far higher. That has badly skewed public perception, since lab footage is what most videos actually show. Males, for their part, behave with extreme caution while approaching a female. They slow down, keep their distance, and try to approach from behind, out of her blind spot. In some species, males literally sway back and forth, trying to look like a twig, not food. There's one African species that has since spread and established itself in New Zealand. In that species, females sometimes eat the male before any mating even starts. No sex involved. That's not a side effect of reproduction anymore. That's straightforward predation on their own kind. Now for the strangest fact in this entire cannibalism story. A male can keep mating after literally completely losing his head. That's possible because a mantis's nervous system isn't centralized the way ours is. The core motor program for copulation is run by a nerve cluster located in the abdomen. That cluster operates independently of the brain and needs no signal from above at all. What's more, the head normally sends inhibitory signals that hold back excess activity. When the head disappears, those inhibitory signals disappear right along with it. As a result, the abdomen's movements don't get weaker. Sometimes they get even more vigorous. One researcher described a headless male continuing his attempts for hours straight. From an evolutionary standpoint, that death might not be a tragedy, it might be an investment. The protein from the eaten male's body goes directly into building a higher quality egg batch. So even at the cost of his own life, the male may be raising his own offspring's odds. But a male who survives and escapes has better odds of fathering more offspring elsewhere. Which is why in most species, evolution doesn't push males toward guaranteed suicide. He takes the risk, but he'll do everything he can to survive and leave after mating. When something threatens a mantis herself, she has a dramatic defensive posture. She suddenly flares her wings open and raises her front legs to look much bigger. In some species, the underside of the wings carries bright patches resembling predator eyes. That display is meant to startle an attacker for just long enough to buy an escape. Certain species add a sharp hissing sound made by rubbing the abdomen against the wings. For a long time, entomology simply assumed insects were incapable of feeling pain at all, which is exactly why insect welfare barely ever entered serious ethical debate. In recent years, more researchers have started openly questioning that old assumption. There's still no clear answer, and the debate continues actively in the scientific community. Meanwhile, mantises have long been kept at home as exotic pets in small terrariums. There's a fairly large hobbyist community with its own forums and rare species trading. Keeping one takes almost nothing beyond a small terrarium, some twigs, and live food. Now let's bust one more stubborn myth, this time not about sex but about garden pest control. Garden centers have long sold mantis egg cases as an eco-friendly pest control solution. The pitch sounds great. Release a mantis and she'll handle your aphids and caterpillars for you. In reality, entomologists unanimously call her an indiscriminate hunter with zero selectivity. She'll happily catch harmful caterpillars, beneficial bees, and rare monarch butterflies alike. Official entomology reports openly state that mantises don't help, they simply eat everything. Worse still, large introduced species are capable of taking down small vertebrates entirely. Over 140 documented attacks on small birds by mantises have been recorded, mostly hummingbirds. The victims span more than 20 different bird species around the world. This happens most often right at feeders filled with sugar water that attract hummingbirds. A mantis grabs a hummingbird either mid-air or by ambushing it right at the feeder. That behavior is mostly seen in large non-native species, not the smaller local ones. The Chinese mantis accidentally arrived in North America back in 1896 with a shipment of plants. Today she's out competing native species and is a major driver of exactly these bird attacks. Conservation experts now openly advise against buying or releasing these egg cases at all. By the way, remember that state insect of Connecticut we mentioned earlier? In 2024, state lawmakers actually formed a working group to reconsider that choice. The reason is simple. The official state symbol turned out not even to be native to America. The European mantis was accidentally brought into the country back in the late 19th century. And as we just learned, exactly these introduced species are the ones hunting hummingbirds. The irony is that a state's supposed nature symbol became a genuine source of concern for ecologists. The conclusion here is simple. A mantis is not a garden helper. She's an ordinary hunter with no moral filter. She doesn't choose pests. She chooses anything slow enough and close enough. Now to cultural history, because different peoples have seen this insect in wildly different ways. For the ancient Greeks, she was a living image of a person seized by prophetic trance. For the San peoples of southern Africa, the mantis became an actual deity. The supreme god of these peoples, named Kagan, can transform into various animals. But he most often appears to people specifically in the shape of a mantis. Kagan is simultaneously a creator and a trickster, sometimes wise, sometimes outright foolish in the myths. It's said the mantis can freeze in total stillness, then strike faster than the eye can follow. That exact duality, perfect stillness and instant violence, is what made her a divine figure for these people. A completely different story unfolded in China in the 17th century. According to legend, martial artist Wang Lang watched a mantis fight a cicada. Though far smaller than the cicada, the mantis outmaneuvered it with precise, calculated moves. Wang Lang was so impressed he built an entire fighting style based on what he'd seen. That style became known as Tanglang Quan, literally the fist of the mantis. Today it's one of the most recognizable kung fu styles, with schools all over the world. Its movements still imitate that same sharp snapping grab of the insect's forelegs. That makes her the only insect that ever gave humanity an entire martial art. In modern pop culture, she hasn't gone unnoticed either. She's shown as a cold-blooded killer across films, video games, and cartoons. One of the main heroic characters in Kung Fu Panda is, in fact, a mantis. So the exact same silhouette has been, to humanity, a prophet, a god, and an assassin. Now let's go back further than any human-written myth at all. Mantises descend from ancient cockroach-like ancestors, and paleontology confirms it. The most reliable mantis fossils turn up in amber roughly 100 million years old, which means she was already hunting exactly like this back in the age of dinosaurs. Some contested finds in Jurassic deposits in Kazakhstan push that history back nearly 150 million years. Even those ancient fossil mantises already had clearly recognizable grasping forelegs. Her main hunting weapon showed up extremely early and has barely changed its design since. It's a design so effective that natural selection never found much reason to redo it. Let's recap the biggest misconceptions about mantises that we've cleared up in this episode. Myth 1. She supposedly always kills her partner. In reality, it happens far from always. Myth 2. She owns the fastest strike in the world. The actual record belongs to a completely different animal. Myth 3. She's a harmless friend to gardeners. In reality, she's an indiscriminate hunter. Myth 4. To the Greeks and the Chinese, she was just a bug. In reality, she was a prophet and a martial arts teacher. The real mantis turns out to be far stranger and far more contradictory than any of those four images. Let's remind ourselves of a few numbers from this episode before we head into the ending. One single insect species carries exactly one ear for its entire body. That lone hearing organ catches frequencies between 25 and 45 kilohertz. The mantis lineage predates bats by tens of millions of years. A single egg case can hold anywhere from a few dozen to 300 future mantises. Only a handful of those hatchlings will actually survive to adulthood in the wild. Cannibalism during mating happens on average somewhere between 13 and 31% of encounters. That is nowhere near the guaranteed death sentence that pop culture keeps selling you. More than 140 documented bird attacks trace mostly back to introduced, non-native species. Her full life cycle skips the pupal stage entirely, unlike butterflies or beetles. That's called incomplete metamorphosis. A miniature copy of the adult hatches straight from the egg. That tiny nymph molts several times, gradually growing in size and eventually growing wings. Wings only appear at the final molts, and by adulthood, they're fully functional. In temperate climates, the entire cycle from egg to adult death fits inside about 1 year. In the tropics, with constant warmth, some species manage more than 1 generation per year. An adult mantis doesn't live particularly long, usually somewhere from a few months to a year. In captivity, with a stable climate and steady food, some individuals live almost 2 years. When cold weather hits in temperate zones, the adults die off. Only the Uthika overwinters. Which means every spring your garden meets a genuinely new generation, not the same insects as before. That short lifespan is part of why reproduction becomes such an uncompromising business for her. When time is scarce, every single chance to reproduce has to be used to the absolute maximum. For humans, a mantis is genuinely harmless despite her whole terrifying reputation. She is technically capable of biting, but it happens extremely rarely and barely hurts. Far more often, if handled carelessly, she'll simply grip your skin with her spiky forelegs. It feels like a poke from a few small needles, unpleasant but completely harmless to your health. No known species of mantis has venom glands that pose any danger to a human being at all. Her entire reputation as a lethal killer applies strictly to the insect world, not to us. Each of those numbers is interesting alone, but together they sketch the portrait of a true survivor. A survivor that outlasted the dinosaurs, outlasted the arrival of bats, and outlasted us and our myths. And one that today, simply by existing, is teaching lessons to robotics engineers. So let's go back to the very beginning of this video and put the whole picture together. Here is an insect the Greeks mistook for a prophet and the Sand People mistook for their own god. An insect that handed humanity an entire martial art still practiced worldwide today. An insect with one single ear for its whole body, an ear that predates the age of bats. An insect with the only confirmed 3D vision among every invertebrate on this planet. An insect whose male can finish the single most important task of his life without a head. And all of it hides behind a motionless pair of folded legs, held as if in prayer. The Greeks weren't entirely wrong to call this creature a prophet. It's just that the prophecy she carries is written not in words, but in raw biology. She knows absolutely nothing about myths, kung fu, or 3D cinema built for insects. She just sits still, waits for movement, and strikes exactly when the distance is right. Modern science still doesn't fully understand how that decentralized abdominal nerve cluster works. It's also still an open question what, if anything, is actually happening inside her during all this. A mantis isn't the only mystery in the invertebrate world, but she's one of the clearest examples. 3D cinema built for an insect would have sounded like a scientist's joke just 10 years ago. Today, it's a real working method for studying the wiring of a brain the size of a poppy seed. And by every indication, this is far from the last astonishing discovery tied to this insect. Write in the comments, have you ever seen a live mantis in the wild with your own eyes? And what surprised you most in this episode, the vision, the hearing, or the story about the head?